who is behind the banning of this? Who is intimidating these venues? Who's getting councils to cancel screenings? Joining us, we've got Naomi Wimborne-Idrissi, who, Naomi, I believe last week you were part of you spoke after a screening that was cancelled, but you managed to find a new venue. Do you want to tell people what happened there?
Yes, I'm going to be a bit careful because the venue that was felt obliged to cancel is understandably very nervous about being outed. And I think one of the things I think we need to learn from this is that we need to start approaching venues and treating them as people who one assumes would want to protect the freedom of speech that both the Daves talked about having been sort of set aside. So I don't want to denounce these people, so I'm not going to name them. But basically, a local activist Salma Ahmed, who some of you probably know, she's great. She'd booked a venue and one in advance, advertised it. I was invited to come up and speak. The very useful discussions that transpire after showings of this film, I must say, about the sort of thing that Dave Murray was talking about, you know, how do we restructure the left and so on and so on. And the day before the screening, which was meant to be on Friday, the 23rd, she got a panic letter from the venue saying, oh, we've been told that this film is all the things that have been alleged against it. We can't possibly go ahead. So sorry, we're cancelling your booking. And they put up notices outside the venue. So someone was in a panic, but we agreed that we would try and find an alternative. And I actually contacted the venue and very politely explained to them that there were, you know, that what they'd been told was probably not true. And could I possibly see the letter that they'd received that put the frighteners on them? And it was a letter from the CAA, the Campaign Against Antisemitism, which it's now on the JVL website, because as a result of this.
I'm going to put the letter up so people can see it. It's the redacted one that you you put on yours.
Okay, while you're doing that, Crispin, I mean, it is line by line, either lies or gross distortions. I mean, it is quite an.
Do you want to go through what's been said in the letter as you do?
Yeah,
so
sure. And I know Asa will be able to develop it. I'm really interested to hear about the Eye on Anti-Semitism people, which I kind of missed them. I think the CAA have been a massive player in this, along with the Board of Deputies. But okay, so they start off saying, this is from Stephen Silverman, who glories in the title of Director of Investigations and Enforcement. I mean, who wants a title like that? He sounds like a fascist from the get-go, doesn't he? So, and he describes the CAA as a charity that does all these wonderful things. So the first thing to do is to challenge who they are. And I won't go into detail here because they are not a campaign against anti-Semitism. They were set up in 2014 to defend Israel against the allegation, the sort of concerns and charges and criticism that it was getting, because it was slaughtering Palestinians at the time. So that's what the CAA really is. Then it says we've been approached by a number of concerned members of the Jewish community. They do this all over the country. They invent concerned members of the Jewish community who they represent. Well, they don't represent anybody except themselves. So that you have to draw that to people's attention. The Jewish community is not represented by these people. In fact, there is not one monolithic Jewish community. Right. And then it talks about the way the film is described in its Eventbrite page, and it alleges that the Equality and Human Rights Commission found the Labour Party leadership guilty of unlawful harassment and discrimination against Jews. I mean, this is A, it's not what the EHRC said, and B, you know, it just patently isn't true. I mean, this is a reference to Pam Bromley and Ken Livingstone, who were the two people the EHRC found judged to have harassed and discriminated against Jews, which they are challenging by judicial review because it's bollocks. So that's, you can go through this thing paragraph by paragraph. Then it goes on about distorting the facts with a conspiratorial premised on the notion that basically that Jews lie about people being racist towards them because they have this global conspiracy going on. That's what it says is the premise of the film. Well, the premise of the film is nothing of the kind, is it? The premise of the film is that anti-Semitism is an evil which should be, which needs to be combated along with other forms of racism, but it has been weaponized. That's the premise of the film. So they lie about that. And then they proceed to lie about a whole number of named individuals who you will all know about. Sorry, I have to keep cancelling my chat thing, keeps interfering. And doesn't mention that any of them are Jews, right? So Jackie Walker is one. The allegations against Ken Loach, who isn't Jewish, but the reason he gets this Holocaust denial nonsense thrown at him is because he was refusing to denounce an Israeli Jew, Miko Peled, whose words have been massively misinterpreted at Labour Party conference in 2017. Then it's Graham Bash, doesn't mention that he's Jewish, from an Orthodox Jewish family, and it calls JVL an anti-Semitism denial group and sham Jewish representative organisation. Well, we ain't that, okay? And Moshe Machavo, this was stunning. I devoted quite a long paragraph to this in my article on the JVL website. Moshe Machavo is described as a Holocaust revisionist. Now, this is just such a gross calumny against Moshe, extraordinary. And then, of course, they don't mention that Alexei Sale, who narrated it, is Jewish, and it accuses him of saying something nasty to poor, shrinking Violet Emma Barnett. I mean, if you look back at what Alexei actually said in a discussion with Emma Barnett on the Jeremy Vine show, he simply pointed out that in her rants about all these nasty pro-Palestinian activists criticizing Israel because they hate Jews, she was effectively supporting the actions of the Israeli state, which was at that time slaughtering Palestinian children back in 2014. Then it goes on to call the film propaganda from anti-Semitism deniers. It's kind of bringing back the same allegations, really. Party broken the law. No, it didn't. And then it compliments Glastonbury for having admirably agreed to drop the planned screening. Obviously the obvious argument is, well, just because Glastonbury did it doesn't mean it's a good thing for other people to do it. It's censorship. It is immediately censorship. It is quite clearly censorship. So yeah, these are the arguments that they are putting. There are probably some others, but if you can scotch all of those, which we hope the JVL.
I mean, can I just come in, because there's one other thing I've noticed on a similar letter where they've quote Paul Mason, because the eminent journalist Paul Mason has written this thing about the film, then this must be correct. So in a way, when we see people on what we call, in inverted commas, the left, who criticize the film, it only gives them more ammunition, doesn't it? For that they can then use against screening it. So we have spoken a bit about that last week. But that's very, very good that you've gone through the letter in that methodical way. I'm just going to bring on Asa, because I'd want to find out a bit more about the organisations that have been sending these intimidating letters. Well, obviously, Campaign Against Antisemitism was the one that Naomi mentioned, Asa. I mean, you sent me a screenshot about them, which was an article actually written by Tony Greenstein on the electronic intifada, which was in 2017. Campaign Against Antisemitism is a campaign against Palestinians. Where do they come from, this campaign against anti-Semitism? What's their origin?
Well, I think that, as Naomi mentioned, the important thing to remember about the campaign against anti-Semitism is that it is, as Tony Greenstein puts it in that article, it's not really a campaign against anti-Semitism. It's a campaign against Palestinians. So it was founded in 2014, and it was founded at exactly the moment when there was a particularly large and vicious Israeli assault on the Gaza Strip. There was a massive war, if you remember, in August of 2014. And that is the exact point when the campaign against anti-Semitism, so-called, started. I recommend everyone goes and reads that article by Tony Greenstein, and which we put up, we published in 2017. We've done a few other articles about it as well, and their record and the kind of things that they've campaigned against. And they're not campaigning against anti-Semitism. They're campaigning almost entirely against Palestinians, against Palestine solidarity groups, and against the left. So in that article by Tony, and of course, like all our articles, we fact-checked it all. I think if I remember, I might have edited this one. And it was, what Tony found was he did an analysis of the Campaign Against Antisemitism's website and the articles they published on it. And he found in their archives, there were just 2 articles that mentioned the far right. Of course, the far right is the source and the originator of the overwhelming majority of cases of real, genuine anti-Semitism, prejudice against Jews and discrimination against Jews as Jews. There was only 2 articles published by the Campaign Against Anti-Semitism about the far right. And he found that there was actually 77 articles attacking Jeremy Corbyn, of course, who was then the leader at the time, attacking Jeremy Corbyn, the Labour Party. So, Jeremy Corbyn being seen by the Campaign Against Anti-Semitism as this, as somebody who was front and center of the Palestine solidarity movement. And so he was their main target. And and of course, left-wing Jews as well. Another target of the Campaign Against Anti-Semitism was Gerald Kaufman, the long-standing lawmaker who died, I think, in 2017, not long before that article was published. Long-standing Labour Party MP, famously supportive of the Palestinians, and so, of course, an object of hate for a group like the Campaign Against Anti-Semitism. And there's a couple of other important things to remember about the CAA is that it, along with the Jewish Labour Movement, was the organisation that referred the Labour Party to the government-run Equality and Human Rights Commission. So the referral of the Labour Party that Naomi mentioned, that resulted in this legally questionable report that found certain findings against Ken Livingstone and Pam Bromley. That was referred by the Campaign Against Anti-Semitism and the Jewish Labour Movement. They both had their own referrals. Now, what both of those groups claimed in their referrals was that the Labour Party was institutionally anti-Semitic. The final report doesn't mention that phrase at all. It was quietly dropped, So this was what the Israel lobby groups, like the Campaign Against Anti-Semitism, were claiming. The JLM was claiming for a long time, for a long part of the period when Jeremy Corbyn was the leader of the Labour Party, that Corbyn's Labour had become institutionally anti-Semitic. It's a key phrase because, I mentioned this in my book. If people remember the case against the lawfare case against the University and College Union, that was carried out by the Israel lobby, by pro-Israel groups, the Jewish Leadership Council, and the pro-Israel lawyer, Anthony Julius, and his law firm, Mishkon Dereya. They were attacking this lecturers union for debating the academic boycott of Israel and trying to claim that there was loads of anti-Semitism in it. They used the exact same phrase, institutional anti-Semitism. And I guess the final point I want to make about the CAA is that it was the CAA, one of their leading researchers or campaigners, Joe Glassman.
I've got that. Shall I? I'll just play that. I'll just play. I'll just play that because I've got that one lined up for you. This is Joe Glassman in a video. You can explain it after, Asa, probably better than me.
A purely personal thank you to every single person out there who actively resisted the anti-Semitism of Corbyn and the Labour Party, and say, well done, Mazel Tov. Just to put me into context, if you don't know, I'm a volunteer at Campaign Against Antisemitism, where I head the political investigations team, which, among other things, was responsible for our successful submission to the AHRC. But today, I'm not speaking in that role. I'm just speaking as one more person who volunteered like you, because the Hanukkah miracle has happened. The beast is slain, and I have an urge to express my love and personal gratitude to every single person, some of whom I've never met, who've.
There you go. You get the gist of it. That where did that video come from? Can you tell us how you? I think you managed to get hold of it, but how was it? How was it that we were able to see this thing?
Yeah, that's a good question, because he actually posted this online himself on Christmas Day, 2019, just a few weeks after the unfortunate 2019 general election, after which Corbyn stepped down as leader, announced he would be stepping down as leader, stayed on as interim leader while there was a leadership election. But yes, Joe Glassman posted it online himself, and he soon regretted that, because activists began making copies of it and posting it online on Facebook. Tony Greenstein posted a copy. It was some comrades in a Momentum branch who alerted me to it. I forget which one, but they made a copy of it. They posted it online, and then I wrote this article about it. But Glassman, after it went beyond his circles and people started being disgusted by it, because I mean, it's reading it, watching it back again, it's very dehumanizing. He's calling, it's part of this kind of dehumanizing narrative that was really weaponized against Jeremy, which resulted in one stage in him being physically assaulted during one of his constituency visits. Which was then downplayed as an egging. It wasn't an egging. It was a punch to the head, and the man was then convicted of assault. So there was all part of this dehumanizing narrative where there was also a Board of Deputies, former Board of Deputies president who said he should be sacrificed. There was all, we're all familiar with the, Dan Hodges, Labour must kill vampire Jezebel.
Yeah, he says the beast is dead, doesn't he?
The beast is slain. The beast is slain, and the caption on screen said "slaughtered," that we slaughtered him. So what you've got there is the Israel lobby very clearly taking responsibility and saying, "We did it. We killed Jeremy Corbyn. It was us who did it."
Other than that, there is another thing that people have pointed out about the CAA. Have you know about this tweet from Margaret Hodge? This is July 2022. Keir Starmer visited Holocaust Memorial on trip to Berlin. Totally appropriate. I'm fed up of CAA using anti-Semitism as a front to attack Labour. Time to call them out for what and who they really are. More concerned with undermining Labour than rooting out anti-Semitism. That's a bit of a shocker coming from Margaret Hodge, isn't it?
Well, this is just part of the sort of intra-Zionist competition where you've got the Zionist left, which is Margaret Hodge, against the Zionist right, which is the CAA, where they're sort of in competition with each other, and they have these kind of beefs with each other, because the CAA was against the Labour Party no matter what, whereas you could say the Liberal Zionists or the Labour Zionists, like the JLM, were essentially trying to sabotage Labour from within during the Corbyn years, and now they, have successfully played a part in turning Labour back to essentially a Blairite. It's new Labour again.
Right. Now, one more. Obviously, we've talked about the CAA, but you've also sent me a screenshot of the Board of Deputies Charitable Foundation Can you tell us about this? This is because the Board of Deputies have been sending out letters as well, haven't they, to these venues?
Yeah, so I mean, I think this is the most important thing for everyone to remember about these kinds of groups is, you know, as Naomi mentioned, they portray themselves as the representatives of the entire Jewish community. They try and speak with this kind of authority. They're a campaign against anti-Semitism. You know, they're the board. They're the Board of Deputies of British Jews. They represent British Jews. That's what they say and they claim. And yet they have these very close ties with the State of Israel, certainly the Board of Deputies. So this is the Board of Deputies' own internal document. One of its own internal documents, you can still see it on the Charities House website, the Charity Commission website. And it says there in black and white, they're boasting about it. You know, we have quite a close working relationship with the Embassy of Israel in the UK, including the ambassador, diplomats and professional staff. And in this particular year, we strengthened links to the Israeli Ministry of Strategic Affairs and the Israeli Army Spokesperson Department. The Israeli Ministry of Strategic Affairs was an Israeli, really kind of a semi-covert agency, which was dedicated to sabotaging the Palestine Solidarity Movement. In its own words, to sabotage, quote, an attack of the Palestine Solidarity Movement around the world, what it called global hubs of delegitimization. This was the words of the Reut Institute, an Israeli think tank, which was incredibly close to the Israeli Ministry of Strategic Affairs. So you've got here the Board of Deputies of British Jews, an organization which claims to represent all British Jews, but actually doesn't. In reality, having this close working relationship with the government of a hostile foreign power, hostile to the Labour Party under Jeremy Corbyn, definitely, and a government which is an apartheid regime.
Can I just ask something else? Because there's something that is often said when you know the Israel lobby is seen as anti-Semitic to even mention there is such a thing as the Israel lobby. But every country has a lobby, doesn't it? Every country would lobby for its interests in this country. I mean, why would Israel not lobby for its interests? I don't understand why there would be a problem with people saying there is an Israel lobby. That's something I find hard.
Yeah, every lobby, you know, it is a corporate or government lobby is going to work most effectively without the disinfectant of sunlight. It's going to work most, especially if it's unpopular, right? Like the apartheid state of Israel is, it's incredibly unpopular, increasingly unpopular around the world. And so, you know, if it has organizations, as it does, lobbying its interests in this country, they're not going to particularly want attention drawn to their activities. And so they lash out with this form of weaponized anti-Semitism against those who call out their activities. But, you know, these groups actually, they refer to themselves as lobbying. You know, they do that. There's an article by the Board of Deputies former President Jonathan R. Kush on timesofisrael.com from 2013, in which he says, quote, "We lobby unashamedly for Israel, and I dare say that the UK government is rather fiercer in its insistence on sanctions against the Iran nuclear threat than the US administration." So he's claiming credit for pro-Israel British government policy.